behalf of Dr. Partha Biswas. Let's not be disappointed by the numbers or the turnout. I think we're all here because of our passion in education, and we are here because we believe that education is the way we create the ophthalmologists of the future. So, quality over quantity, that's where we are today. I'm Dr. Meenakshi Swaminathan, and I will be the convener of this first section of this program. There is a simultaneous session going on in the neighboring hall as well, so feel free to stroll in and out if you want to listen to other speakers or other points of view. But we will start by first inviting the chairpersons of the first session. If you are here, Dr. Mohit Khatri, please occupy the stage. Is Dr. Tripti Kadam here? Dr. Padmaja Krishnan? Dr. Bala Murugan? Did I say your name right? It's spelled wrong, I'm sorry. I didn't spell it. Dr. Shalini Garg? And I'm sure Dr. Rohit Saxena is not here. And Dr. Sanjeev Mittal? So we will start the program right on time. Another 4 minutes to go. Should we start, do you think? Okay. But I want to hear from the speakers. Do you think we should start, or should we wait a couple of minutes? We'll wait a few minutes? Yes, let's wait a few minutes for those who arrive right on time. All right. So since this is going to be on teaching methods, and we have several points, counterpoints that we're going to be looking at. We're looking at how about teaching in a crowded outpatient clinic. We're also going to look at whether second and third year residents should be given teaching assignments. How about everyday bedside teaching for the residents? Formal teaching of soft skills. Do they just learn from us, role models, or do we actually, formal through didactics, deliver soft skills? And should we have lectures or interactive classes? So I think it's not all or none, as we all know. Some of these topics are just imaginative. The truth is somewhere in between. And so I'm as curious as all of you to listen to what you all have to say. My request is to restrict your presentation to 4 minutes. And we also have a keynote address towards the end of the session. I'm happy for the chairpersons to introduce yourself. Chairpersons, I'm happy for you to introduce yourself, please.
Okay. I'm Dr. Shalini Garg, a senior consultant at St. Stephen's Hospital in Delhi.
I'm Dr. Bala Murugan from Aravind Hospital, Pondicherry.
Myself, Dr. Mohit Khatri from Kanpur.
I'm Sanjeev Mittal, Professor Head from AIIMS Rishikesh.
Just waiting for this cue to start.
Speaker has come, I think.
No, speakers are here. First speakers are here. निकाल सकते हो मेरे mine is only second session. ये लैपटॉप जो लगी हुई है you can take it off. तो next speaker यहाँ यूज कर सकता है. ठीक है, thank you. हाँ, ये मेरा तो बाकी काम में है. अभी नेक्स्ट स्पीकर जो है ना उनका इधर रुकवा दिया. उधर से हो जाए. ठीक. All right. So the first debate is going to be teaching in a crowded OPD, must versus optional. And to speak on must is Dr. Jaishet.
Hi, good morning everyone. Very happy to be invited for giving a talk at this session, and happy to start as the first day, first show. So my topic is teaching in a crowded OPD, and I feel it is absolutely a must. And it is not just me, but we'll go through a little bit of literature also. So this was a study that was published of around 1600 medical students, and they were asked a question like, what suggestions do you have for improving the attractiveness of internal medicine? And their suggestion was, most frequent suggestion was increase in the ambulatory care experience for them, that is increase in the OPD. So that is a primary thing what any kind of medical student would be looking for. Why such? So as we know, Sir William Osler had told that medicine is learned by the bedside and not in the classroom. And let not your conceptions of disease come from words heard in the lecture or room or read from the book, but you have to see them, reason it out, compare and control. So when we attend a crowded OPD, we see a lot of variety of cases, and we learn first-hand patient care, including history taking, clinical examination, a differential diagnosis and treatment. He had also said that he who studies medicine without books sails an uncharted sea, but he who studies medicine without patients does not go to the sea at all. And we also learn about various aspects of clinical management of the patient. We observe how the consultant sees the patient, how the consultant talks to the patient. So all these things are very, very important in our day-to-day practice. And also we develop good amount of communication skills and also learn about an effective doctor-patient relationship, because a good physician treats the disease, but the great physician treats the patient who has the disease. So there's a lot of placebo effect also that is involved when we see an ambulatory patient. So that is what we learn when we observe our consultants talking to the patients. Now, of course, the challenge for the clinical educator or the teacher is to create an opportunity and space for meaningful dialogue with the students in a very heavy and crowded OPD. So I'll go through some of the points that can be done actually. So we have to define the learner's objective. Like the teacher can outline the expectations, like the number of patients what the student can see. If the consultant sees 100 OPD, not necessary that the student has to see all the patients. He can see a limited number of patients. The time that the student spends with each amount of patient, and any specific clinical examination that should be done in the patient. Like we can just tell our students, like I'd like to see only 2 patients this morning. Take 15 or 20 minutes for each patient, and when you are done, you come back to me, and then when we have a break, we can discuss about the clinical examination and evaluation of the patients. And there are multiple teaching ways, methodologies can be applied. Either we prime the student, that is for each patient with a new problem, we can go through differential diagnosis, like a patient coming with a circumcorneal congestion. So there are very few differential diagnoses like a uveitis or a corneal ulcer. So those things can be discussed. Or even for a patient who comes for a follow-up visit, for a post-cataract visit, we can just discuss whether what are the early and late post-operative complications that can be expected. The other method is of course modeling, that is more effective, in which the teacher simply thinks out loud. When we are observing the patient, we think out loud. We tell what are the differential diagnoses that are possible, and why and how we rule out each of them and come to a final diagnosis. And it really helps patient flow through a busy clinic effectively and provides a nice balance to the question answer style of examination. And this was another study that was done to assess the effectiveness of a teacher. And there they found that the most important characteristic of ambulatory care teachers was that they were actively involving the learners or the students. So to conclude, one of the strengths of ambulatory education is the opportunity for learners to interact with the patients and also along with the teachers, and to model what they enjoy most about the medicine, And when the teacher asks questions, presents general rule to the students and model interactions, it creates a very brief opportunity for them to interact. And not only do learners learn about the specific rules but also about the general rules for management of a patient, and asking questions and modeling interaction helps teachers share themselves and their love for medicine with the learners. Thank you. Sorry for overshooting.
That was perfect. So we'll take, thank you, Dr. Sheth.
Okay.
And we will take discussions at the end of the session from the from the chairpersons. Next, we invite Dr. Rupali Mahesh Gauri, and she'll be talking on teaching in crowded OPD is just optional.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, ma'am. Good morning, persons. I'm Dr. Rupali Mahesh Gauri, Professor of Ophthalmology, Dr. D.Y. Patil Medical College. My topic is just optional. Now, do you think that what is more important? Being a teacher, there is always a dilemma. Are you patient-oriented or a student-oriented? So this dilemma, I feel, for the OPD base, OPD is a USP of the hospital. When there is a patient load has to be increased in IPD, the OPD procedures should be smooth. Patient should be happy at the OPD level. So there should be a minimum time to be given for the teaching and the maximum time to be given for the patient care. That is why I feel that it should be there should not be an elaborated teaching in the OPD. Why this problem is there? When we start teaching in the OPD basis, the patients, they are waiting and waiting with their small kids, sometimes with the old age person. They have different multiple systemic issue also. So these patients are getting problem because of your teaching procedure. So, and it is all just the time constraint. All problems are related to time constraint. Second point, from the patient's point of view, the patients, we didn't sought informed consent from the OPD level that used as a clinical material, which is there like in a IPD setup. And second thing, the patient don't have their lack of privacy. There is a lack of privacy and the dignity of the patient. Many students are seeing if you find one particular patient, many students are going and seeing the findings. That patient may get harassed also sometime. And it may do some negative publicity, वहाँ पे तो बहुत time waste होता है, OPD में ही. Then you are lacking on the patient load in the IPD. Now these are only the patient point of view you are considering. No, there are some learners challenges also in OPD teaching. Many times they are like a passive observer, because as we see in this picture, the consultant is sitting on the chair and is talking. He or she is seeing the patient clinically, and most of the talk goes on a theoretical, like a keratic precipitate. It should be just like this is how the keratic precipitate look, and that's all. It is mutton fat or it is a fine capes. But the discussion is going on, how the aqueous current flow. This is just because being a teacher, we want to speak more. So this is how the patient are lacking. And they are like just a passive observer rather than an active learner. It's like accessing a Wikipedia rather than editing a Wikipedia. There are different, we don't know what patients are going to come in the OPD. So there is no clear objective to the student as well as the teacher also, what I am going to teach. So they are like, they don't have a clear objective, what I am going to learn today. But if we'll see in the IPD, there will be they know, these are the patient admitted. They read something about it, they come with the queries. So they will have better knowledge and better clinical skills also. And there is a lack of opportunity for reflect their doubts, because considering the time constraint, they can't ask the question. We may say, we will discuss it later. So why not the later opportunity of bedside clinic is used rather than the OPD teaching? There are inadequate feedback also for the students, because many times the consultant is seeing here, the resident is seeing over there, and what he is doing, we cannot give a proper feedback in front of patient that you have done this thing wrongly, because the patient may get a lack of confidence in the treating doctor. Okay, so that is why many times it is not a time-specific feedback, and time-specific feedback is required. These are the learner challenges and the teacher's challenges. There is most of the time, as I said, it is a recall on the fact, not on the clinical sign. And many times, being a busy OPD, teachers speak loudly. So it is a high pitch, and the patient may get disturbed also. The lack of identification of need of the learner. Many times, are we talking to the JR? Are we talking to the CR? What is his need? That we just lost, because multiple learner, multiple problems. So it is difficult to identify the particular need of the student who is standing in front of you. And obviously, being a medical college teacher, we have NAC, we have NABH, we have ISO, so many things together. So dean is calling, so you cannot supervise your student properly. So these are the challenges for the teacher. Now, can we just stop teaching over there? No, because as we see, बच्चा भी दूध पीना सीख जाता है. Just he start eating with his own hand just by observational skill. So be a role model in front of the your student and see the patient. He can learn many things without actually a formal teaching. To summarize, it is a busy clinical setting, teaching time often short, no time for elaborate teaching, no control over distribution and organization of time, attending to several patients at same time with multiple level learners, brief teacher-trainee interactions, patient care demands usually priority and must be addressed, multiple patients' problem, addressed simultaneously, so teacher cannot focus on one problem to teach, and learning service is more on priority. Organic and psychosocial problems are intervened. Diagnostic questions are often settled by follow-up in the empiric treatment. So I think teacher should be a guide and facilitator rather than the information provided in OPD teaching. We must acknowledge that most important, indeed the only thing we have offered to our student is ourselves. Everything else they can read in the book. These are my references. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rupali. You've made quite a convincing argument. We'll listen to the veteran teachers on the dais later. Thank you. Are the next speakers here, Dr. Garvit and Dr. Priyanka? If they're not here, let's move to the next topic. Is Dr. Ketki here? All right. And is it Dr. Nelson who's going to be speaking? Dr. Moses. Where's Dr. Moses? I'm sorry, Dr. Moses. All right, Dr. Ketki, come on over. We encourage you, we ask you to speak on everyday bedside teaching for residents. And Dr. Ketki is speaking on must.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Ketki. I'm from Guru Nanak Eye Center. So my topic for today is everyday bedside teaching for residents, a must. What is bedside teaching? It is a part of clinical rounds where both student and instructor attend the patient's bedside to discuss the case or demonstrate a clinical procedure. And the students have the opportunity to see how the attending physician relates to the patient, and they also receive hands-on instructions. So as it has already been said, Sir William Osler's words that to study the phenomena of disease without books is like to sail an uncharted sea, while to study books without patients is like not going to sea at all. And medicine is learned by the bedside and not in the classroom. Sir William Osler was actually one of the founders of Johns Hopkins University. There are 3 domains of learning: cognitive, affective, and psychomotor. The cognitive domain, that is knowledge, can be acquired from books, but affective, that is how you feel about it, and the psychomotor domain has to be learned at the bedside. The challenges in bedside teaching for a teacher, as it has already been highlighted, there's lack of time, uncontrolled environment at the bedside, lack of teaching role models who will inspire you to teach, and there's decreased value of teaching in general. For a trainee, it may be lack of time, negative learning environment, fear of making mistakes, or difficulty discussing differentials, discussing awkward details in front of the patient, and not knowing what is being expected from him. And the changing nature of the teaching hospitals, the shorter admittance, daycare patients, that is why the more load coming on the treating physician, Plus, there's a vicious cycle. These days, people tend to go less to the bedside and more to conference room presentations, which has to break. People have to go more to the bedside and less to conference room presentations. The discrepancies in perception, especially for the physicians who are younger physicians, they feel that they are being demeaning and burdening to the patients. Whereas it has been found in studies that patients, most of them, they actually appreciate bedside teaching because of the extra time and insight given to their medical situation. And as you can see, even pediatric patients are quite happy. And there are no indications of increased stress. This is actually according to studies. There's an article in 2014 which actually says this. And they report to obtain a better understanding of their disease, and they actually rate the residents as more competent if they are able to present properly bedside. And it is so memorable. If a certain sign is being demonstrated at bedside to a trainee, he will remember it for his life. And some experiences, they may not be even clinical, but they are likely to be remembered. And it is possible that you prompt some new information from the patient that may even actually change the management totally. About the evidence, there is a recent editorial by Dr. Santosh Honavar in 2019 IJO, which is actually back to the bedside, and it emphasizes bedside teaching. There's another one in 2018 IJO by Dr. Grover et al., which emphasizes bedside teaching. And the Stanford School of Medicine in their Skills Symposium 2020 has also emphasized this. And even the American Board of Ophthalmology has given the ophthalmic clinical evaluation exercise, which is actually how you rate the residents based on their bedside evaluation. In my experience, at our center, we give a lot of emphasis on bedside teaching. Conventional clinical rounds with bedside teaching are still practiced by consultants and residents, and case presentations on a daily basis by postgraduate residents is done. So, I would recommend that bedside teaching has to be structured before, during and after. It reduces the risk of possible discomfort from the side of the patients, the trainee and the trainer. And we link the learning on the rounds to other learning by assigning topics or short talks or giving assignments. And there should be a code of conduct. There should be no whispering in the patient's room, no telephone calls, no laughing at the patient or his responses, and the behavior has to be respectful. Thank you. I acknowledge my faculty and postgraduates for this presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Ketki. Next, Dr. Moses will be presenting Dr. Lionel Raj's presentation that bedside teaching is optional.
Very good morning to one and all. I'm here to present the presentation of Dr. Lionel Raj. He couldn't make it today, so I'm going to present his views on this topic. The topic being bedside teaching, present-day perspectives, it is an optional. The background of this talk is the transferability of the methods of academic teaching. It is as important as sustainability. So these are the conventional teaching methodologies that we follow: wet lab teaching, bedside teaching, classroom teaching, practical courses, and case-oriented teaching. Is there definitely a need for change? Yes, there is. Why? Because of the high standards of a blended learning. Transition from ex-cathedra teaching to a mixture of lectures and practical hands-on and patient-centered teaching is gaining importance. Establish a learning climate, art of combining both patient care and educational activities, resident apprehensions by creating a learner-oriented environment, and bedside to conference rooms are the deal of the day. Present-day teaching, many of us would agree with this. Most of us refer to PubMed and Google web-based search. Research softwares are there, Mendeley, Zotero, and there are focus group discussions which give us more insight into what we want to learn. And teleeducation, we cannot ignore the role of teleeducation in today's era. The grand rounds, conferences, continuing medical education. What we are now is a part of continuing medical education, seminars, journal clubs, online lectures, case-based stimulations, online quizzes, internet-based multimedia tutorials all play a role. Knowledge acquisition, from various ways we acquire our knowledge through various professors, clinical experiences, global exposure, cutting-edge technology, research, and evidence-based teaching. What are the advantages of internet-based teaching and learning? The content is quickly updated, multimedia presentations are possible, and the use of these sources is independent of time and location. What are the barriers that we encounter in bedside teaching? There are less number of patients, uncooperative patients, lack of respect for the patient, faculty attitude, knowledge and risk, time constraints, learner autonomy, and over-reliance on technology. Declining bedside teaching skills, the aura of bedside teaching, a belief that bedside teachers should possess an almost unattainable level of diagnostic skill, erosion of teaching ethic, hospital chaotic nature, missed opportunities are all part of drawback. Monotonous and do not generate active participation from listeners. Learning becomes passive. Function of leadership is to produce more leaders, not followers. So I would like to conclude with this presentation. A visual presentation of details is an easier way via multimedia tools, and the training is followed by causing stress for the patients. So the idea of this presentation is not to ignore bedside teaching, but there are better modes of teaching which we can engage and which we can use to train our present day residents. Thank you.
Okay, we move on to the next topic, which is teaching of soft skills. Formal teaching, a must. Dr. Karan Bhatia.
Thank you, AIOS and ARC, for this opportunity. It feels grateful actually to be part of the teachers program when my teacher is in the panel here itself, Dr. Balamurugan. So the topic, as I said, is formal teaching of soft skills, which is a must. So a study was conducted at Harvard Business School to find out what makes a person a great wealth creator. So was it intelligence? Was it good education? Was it good grades? Was it a family background? Was it heredity? Was it family wealth? Was it hard work? What was it? In fact, it was none of these. What they found can be summed up as soft skills. So dictionary.com defines soft skills as desirable qualities for certain forms of employment that do not depend on acquired knowledge. I repeat, they do not depend on acquired knowledge. They include common sense, the ability to deal with people, and a positive, flexible attitude. So it includes strong communication and interpersonal skills, which are very important because it helps in recognition of the patient's level of understanding, providing appropriate feedback. It also makes you sensitive to the patient's concerns and fears, and also to respect their spatial boundaries. So it's very, very important. It gives you emotional stability. It gives you flexibility. It gives you, now can anybody recognize this person on the screen? Yes, so Milkha Singh had a very strong work ethic, and he was very bound to time. Because of this is all he was as successful as he was. So this is all part of soft skills. It gives you the ability to deal with pressure, like Milkha Singh. It gives you self-confidence. It gives you also the ability to deal with criticism. It even gives you attention to detail. It teaches you body language, like James Bond 007. It also teaches you humor, because it's very important at times to relax your patients. It also emphasizes on the importance of teamwork. As you can see over here, Mission Mangal, the team that was there. So this team accomplished the impossible in very limited resources. It gives you professionalism because it helps make your work your career, and it's actually expected in our line of work. So why do you want to teach soft skills? Because they make for a productive, happy staff, and as well as satisfied patients. In fact, it is an important part of the USMLE exams nowadays. So the Harvard Business School, now they stress 85% of their work on teaching soft skills rather than the technical skills. So how do soft skills actually help? Because if people are confused, they are underconfident, they have a lot of self-doubts, soft skills helps in that. It also provides the problems with helps you tackle lack of communication skills. So an excellent surgeon or a clinician may not be a successful practitioner because of the lack of these communication skills with your patient, therefore resulting in an unsuccessful practice. Violence against doctors. Now this is very common nowadays. Why is it? Because our colleagues are not very well versed with soft skills. Soft skills also give you a lot of confidence. They help in personality development. They also help you create awareness about what you're doing in your line of work. It also helps develop a critical thinking skills which are necessary when performing patient assessment and care, and also for processing a higher level of information. It also helps you teach leadership skills, as you can see in cricket from Saurav Ganguly's time to Dhoni's, and now Virat Kohli leading India. Also, AIOS has also got a couple of programs like the Open House Leadership Program, the LDP program, which are all part of soft skills. It helps in the classroom teaching. In fact, it should be a part of the curriculum. Rounds and OPD also, it's important there. Now, everybody will say that there's a lack of time. There's so many classes. How do you incorporate soft skills into this curriculum? Because what you can do is, you shouldn't make any changes in the curriculum. What you can do is increase in group discussions, trainee presentations, and these lessons will become more attractive and increase the success rate of our students. So in fact, what will they do is they'll make learning fun. So teachers have a special responsibility as they have a major impact on the development of young surgeons, not only clinically but also personally. Can you recognize the person on the screen over here? Yes. So Achrekar has had two students. One of them was Kambli and the other was Tendulkar. One person, the Kambli, was actually better, more talented than Tendulkar. But where is he and where is Tendulkar? Tendulkar is the god of cricket on the cover of Time magazine. In fact, what are we learning in these lessons today? We are formally learning soft skills. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Bhatia. I request the chairpersons to keep noting down how you will teach soft skills, are teaching soft skills in your programs, for further comments later. Thank you, Dr. Bhatia. Is Dr. Neha here? Dr. Neha Laka is going to be speaking on teaching of soft skills is just optional.
Good morning, everyone. Formal teaching of soft skills should be just optional. Life is called a journey for a reason. It's one learning through living it and not by being dictated to. Soft skills are attributes of every person which are required for effective interaction and communication. We develop them based on what we are, and they are needed to complement hard skills. Soft skills are just not the formal or technical knowledge, while they are the skills, abilities, and traits that pertain to personality, attitude, and behavior. Soft skills are important so as to handle interpersonal relationship, to take appropriate decisions for effective communication, and to have good impression and impact to gain personal and professional development. Most valued soft skills are time management, team spirit, ambition, focus, and empathy. And what are hard skills? Hard skills are the skills that relate to formal or technical knowledge. They are quantifiable and can be evaluated, while the soft skills are difficult to be evaluated. A practitioner should have strong communication skills and should be a good listener. He should be empathetic, that is, he should have ability of a person to see things from others' perspective, and should have equally strong imagination to visualize himself in others' position. The practitioners and the supporting staff should be able to work in a cross-functional team to ensure superior patient experience. A great quote by William Osler: "A good physician treats a disease, while a great physician treats a patient who has a disease." This quote is quite right for doctors, but still I would like to keep formal teaching of soft skills as optional, because certain aspects of soft skills like time management, teamwork, communication skills can be taught, while others like empathy, leadership qualities are inbuilt and are hard to taught. These are the skills which are supposed to be imbibed in children in schools. Thus, I feel keeping formal teaching is optional is beneficial to those who have already learned these skills during schools and can now invest their time in other positive aspects of their fields. The upcoming generations have an advanced upbringing due to improved facilities, numerous academic and extracurricular opportunities, and improved standard of living, which ensure presence of soft skills in them, which precludes any such deficit. Time management during post-graduation is already a task, and imposing another compulsory class on them would overburden them and create more stress. all the postgraduates don't aim to run OPD. Some may join institutes with more physical work or research work, and for them it would prove useless. Communication is one's own talent. You can't teach them to communicate in a particular way, plus a person has to behave in a uniform manner throughout the world might not be a good idea. In the end, life is a journey to be experienced and not a problem to be solved.
Thank you, Dr. Neha. We'll listen to the comments later. The upcoming generation is what you talked about. I'm not able to let them look up from the phone. If they look up from the phone, maybe life will begin. Are the next lecturers here, next speakers? Dr. Anant is here. I think Dr. Deepak Agarwal is here. Oh, Dr. Tuhin Chowdhury. You can speak from there. Yes, please. Welcome. He's going to be speaking on only interactive lectures, no didactics.
Okay, good morning everyone, respected chairpersons and my dear colleagues. I will be talking on didactic lectures versus interactive lectures. So only interactive is the best way to make your students to be more learned. So the interactive classes are widely advocated as a means of teaching to provide effective health education, but implementation has proved challenging. The lack of implementation of interactive classes has been attributed to several practical and conceptual challenges, and there are some barriers such as limited time and skills have been widely identified as threats to implementation. So just what a didactic lecture looks like. Suppose that this is the didactic lectures, the students are sleeping, and this is the big illusion. So sometimes you can find that there is some picture there is in front and this student is sleeping. So teacher for your children, what should be? So you feel that the teacher should be just giving some lecture, just like a spiritual or a mystical leader, and then your students should be listening and say that I am fine, I am okay, I have learned everything. But in most cases, they usually stop listening after 5 minutes. And sometimes they usually tell that what's a bore, and sometimes they just chat themselves, all these things. So the didactic lecture is the most useful things to make your children better. And what is the teacher for your children? It should be like that. So which coach you will prefer? Those coaches which are just giving some blackboard task and then just not doing anything. But these are the coaches which are really needed for your children or for anything like that. So advantages of interactive learning is that it reaches relatively larger audience, it builds confidence among students, it provides immediate feedback, it increases participation, and there is emphasis on problem solving, and it develops analytical thinking and meets individual students' need. So let's look at the evidence. There are many studies which showed that the results were poorer when the students were taught by didactic lectures as compared to interactive sessions. This is the study which was done in this advanced physiological educations. The use of engaging lectures led to a statistically significant higher average on unit exams, and they found that the increased perceived differences of lectures, decrease in distractions during lecture, and increased confidence with the material. Another study is that this came in International Journal of Contemporary Medical Research, which showed that statistically significant difference between the means of pre-test and post-test marks of both interactive lectures and tutorials, and found that interactive lectures are having better results. Another also this came, that is this in dental surgery, that blended surgery, a blended method of teaching, and they found that blended method was found to be better than traditional lecture in teaching the oral surgery topic to the dental undergraduates. So students' perceptions of lecturing approach on traditional versus interactive teaching, and they found that students that means help students to become more attentive and to be more motivated in that interactive lectures. And the feedback from these questions allowed the lecturer to modify lectures to focus on the areas of deficiency and difficulty and giving instructions from the feedback. So what are this old Chinese saying says that, I hear it and I forget it. If I see it, I remember it. If I do it, I know it. So to sum up, becoming a reflective learner also requires being confident, responsible, innovative and engaged. And that can be only possible if we are going for interactive lectures only. Thank you.
Dr. Chaudhary, is your opponent here?
No, nobody is there.
Opponent did not even show up.
No.
Yeah, okay, you're a clear winner. Right. Thank you. So we'll have some time for comments, questions from the audience, comments from the audience. And we can see that we are a small group, so time for interaction.
I'm Professor Dr. Saranabhava here. I just want to as the podium and the other audience here, is there any role for bedside teaching in ophthalmology at all? That is my question. Role for bedside teaching pertaining to ophthalmology.
Our speakers, first I would like the comments from there itself. Who's speaking against bedside teaching?
No, like
because I would like to really discuss that.
Why I raised my question was that my professor used to tell ophthalmology is a field of science, not even symptoms. You see and you pick up most of the things. But if that is the case, then where is the role of a bedside teaching where you don't have any accessories like a slit lamp or something? Maybe if at all you can do an indirect or an ablation. I mean the tonometry at the bedside.
It also depends if you have beds.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's
Nowadays
become
it's become a
increasingly
daycare.
ambulatory.
Exactly. Now it's become a daycare. And what is the role of the bedside?
Yeah, I just put up something to it. You are very correct, like in ophthalmology is such a specialty, like where we are working on daycare as well. And but it's not entirely 100% daycare. Besides the actually bedside teaching basically entails something like a pre-operative round when the patient is admitted like for surgery, then post-operative. There are two things like pre-operative and post-operative thing part mostly. Or if the patient is for treatment, no surgical intervention, then daily you are taking a round, right? So bedside teaching is important for those patients like where no surgical process has been done. For that it's important. Of course, why? Because it's actually soft skills also a part of that. History is also part of that. I agree that it is not as important as in general medicine or surgery comparison to that, but it still has some play. For example, suppose you had operated cataract patient, suppose, and you have beds in a big hospital setup, and in the evening you feel like or there is no need of taking a round, patient are sleeping comfortable. You will tell the resident just take a round, just ask for something, or nurse will tell. But suppose as a consultant, at least once take a round, it will develop a habit to the residents. It's basically habit forming, number one. Number two, then at least you come across, because we have been facing several times, certain little things are ignored. Like sometimes some problem happens, then we come to know like nobody has taken a round properly. So I mean, as a routine, I mean there should be a habit for admitted patient, but certainly it's not as important as medicine surgery, general surgery.
And the second point I want to raise is the interactive lectures as compared to the didactic ones. I've been a postgraduate and undergraduate teacher. As it's rightly shown, most of the people either, as Madam said, they are off their, they are not at all looking on the thing, they are all the time on the mobiles or gadgets. Either way they are doing something, or they are not physically present, mentally absent. That is the scenario routinely I face. So any views regarding this, their role for didactic versus interactive, where it is outrightly obvious that interactive would be taking over the didactic ones.
Right. How do you engage the current distracted generation? I think that's what you're trying to ask, no, Dr. Saravanan?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. How do you get them engaged? How do you get them involved in classes and to interact? Because they seem to be a very distracted generation.
I think the most important step here is to tell them to keep their gadgets outside of the classroom if it is a didactic class. Because otherwise they tend to say that everything is already on Google, why do we attend a lecture at all? And when it's an interactive session again, if the phones are out and they would interact, it will also help them gain their soft skills. That is where there is a role of soft skill development when they talk to the teachers, when they talk to their peers, and when they are talking to the patients. And again, it is to be clubbed with bedside teaching, as sir very rightly said. It is the surgical patients who require a bedside attendance, pre-operative and post-operative. And most importantly, as you said, the habit forming thing and the patient confidence in the doctors. Once we go and say hello to them post-operatively, even when we know everything is going to be fine, the surgery went fine, the patient is comfortable and he can go back. But once you just go and say, hello, I am here, and if you have any problem, I am here, my residents are there, it gives them all the confidence, and half of the healing happens there itself. So that is what is important.
I have a few comments to make. First of all, this generation is not totally distracted. They are very intelligent and they have come to study in the class. So just calling them distracted won't be very correct. And rather than just alligating them not to be attentive, I think the person who prepares the lecture should make it very interesting. We can incorporate videos. It can be a PowerPoint presentation rather than a whiteboard or a blackboard presentation. And a good communication skill on the part of the teacher. We all have been students. We have categorized our teachers, to be very honest, that some teacher teaches very well, some teacher doesn't teach is that good or is not very expressive, and those were not the times of PowerPoint. So in that scenario also, a good communication by the teacher obviously helps the students more and makes them very much interactive, and people bunk other subjects and attend that teacher's class also.
I agree with the said this thing. Lecturing, like the speaker said about the interactive session, that's true. But for the first time learners, like for MBBS class students, the lecturing is most important, and that depends upon the teacher, how effective the teacher is.
Yes.
Because we remember, like I am in ophthalmology, for example, just giving an example, my teacher, Professor BMD Verma, must have some people must have heard. I am in ophthalmology because he was such a nice teacher, it created interest in me in ophthalmology. So basically it's a teacher. So for first time learner, teaching is, lecturing is very important. That is to teacher how impressive, interesting, and how to break the monotony. Like medical education has been teaching nowadays all these things, like how to break the monotony of the students in between. And of course, interactive, I mean, it has to be an amalgamation of all the things, interactive sessions, seminars, other things, all things are important for that matter.
I think you have better PGs than I have. Dr. Mohit, I think.
I have a small little
yes,
point. To make students not to get involved too much or distracted with technology, actually we need to engage them with the technology. In other words, what I do is when I demonstrate a new clinical sign, say a disease of toxoplasma retinitis, you see a headlight and fog appearance, and what I tell them is, so you had a view of the patient in your own eyes. Now take a break, go to the library or go to Google, search all pictures of toxoplasma and come back with a PowerPoint of 10 pictures, just only the pictures, the description of the pictures, what you see in Google or Google Image or whatever image site you want, go and look at it, download it, copy paste it, come back to me in 20 minutes. So in 20 minutes, they get to see the different variants of the same toxoplasma retinitis, and by which they understand much better. So that is one way I engage students using technology rather than getting distracted. The other way is when I ask them to do a journal discussion, say on a particular topic, and we ask them to do a lateral search on a particular foci of which the particular journal describes, ask them, you divide them into subgroups, and each subgroup is given a particular domain to be searched within that same discussion, and come back in the same class after 20 minutes or so and give the viewpoints which they found in the literature. I think we need to use the best of the internets and all the technology stuff to make them make their life more interesting.
Very, very well said. While you're just making the comment, I just want to know if any of the other, I saw a few people walk in. Is Dr. Garvit or Dr. Priyanka, Dr. Anand, anybody here in the audience who is supposed to speak in the session? Please go ahead, Doctor.
With regards to bedside teaching, I did my DO from Regional Institute, Chennai. we still have that kind of a bedside teaching even now. Uh, Post-admission day, we definitely go to the wards. We have to be ready by 8:30 for our chief to do the rounds. It still exists, but that doesn't rule out technology per se. So that needs to be done. And even for post-op rounds, we go from every bed to bed, and we open the patch, and then we see the post-ops. But now in a corporate setup, we are slowly shifting towards that setup, where we don't have any beds. Any beds except for the operating table and the recovery bed, we don't have any beds. So that bedside teaching in a corporate institute which has a DNB doesn't hold now. But even in regional institute, we have moved more towards a technology-based teaching scenario. And for the technology-based side, even when we were studying, a junior KG student will know only in ABCD. But my children now are saying extinct animals. They are talking about extinct animals. So that is the advantage with technology. They are getting to learn more. It doesn't distract, but that doesn't rule out the conventional teaching practice also. Both needs to go hand in hand to have a good effect.
Thank you. Dr. Rohit, please come up on stage with the chairpersons. Please, let's, your vast teaching experience, let's listen to your comments as well.
Thank you.
Tell us about your comments on technology for students,
So,
interaction, didactics. What do you think?
I think I was listening to the discussion. I absolutely concur. I mean, it's like the saying that, do what you. I mean, like, you should do what you like, but otherwise, if you can't do that, you like what you do. So you can't fight technology. It's everywhere. It's permeated to every aspect of our life. And I mean, like, this is a sheer example. The bedside round teaching was being discussed. I am discussing a case, and I am talking about a sign. And the children at the back are Googling that and coming back and telling me, sir, this article actually said this, and maybe you need to revise your own knowledge and information. So you can get caught on the wrong foot also sometimes. But again, technology has to be your friend. You have to involve them. And I mean, this is a line I learned from one of the best teachers in RP Center, Dr. S.P. Garg. And he used to say that it's not my job to teach you. It's your job to learn. My job is just to make you interested in the process of learning. So give them that little bit of information that stimulates them to go back and find out. All cases, all patients can generate that inquisitiveness in the student that they will go back and search. In our times, we had to go to the library and try and find out books. It was a more tedious process, but it gave us a lot more information than just that topic I was looking for. So, if I was just looking for toxo, I would have to run through all the kind of retinal infections before I came to that small paragraph on toxo and one photograph on that appearance. But now, of course, they Google. So you have to push them that many more questions, which they go back and ask Google. So they ask the book, Saraswati Devi, or they ask God Google. It's like, it's whoever you pray to now, I say.
You sure it's not Goddess Google? No, I'm just kidding. Thank you. So let's hear about another interesting discussion we had about teaching soft skills, formal teaching. How do you all do it? How do you teach formally?
I would say one of the most important thing is when the resident is talking to your patient, you are there. And later on, if you need to correct or improve on the soft skills of your residents, that this is how you talk to the patient, or this is how you try to elicit an history, or this is how you commented about one of side, and this is the other way it should have been done. So we cannot teach soft skills on paper and pen or on a whiteboard. They have to go when you are interacting with the patients. And as very important is the privacy of the patient, we cannot correct them right there. So we just have to observe and correct later on.
To add to this, like what you said is correct, and it starts right from the beginning of MBBS, when the case presentation is the key to that, and case presentation rounds, all those are the key. Bedside teaching is the
key to soft skills would be definitely by demonstration. So if I am aggressive in the OPD, if I am rude to the patient, the students will learn, and they are worse off because it's a typical thing that happens in our teaching system. The one who doesn't know anything is thrown into the deep end of the pool. He's going and sitting and running an OPD of 50 patients and he doesn't know what to do with them. Why will he lose temper? Because he doesn't have answers to those questions the patients are asking. So he tries to bluster his way through, 50 patients. So you need to tell, if you yourself acknowledge your limitations. I mean, as doctors, we know we have limitations. Our soft skills are that we have to tell the patient this without him leaving us, without him feeling that he has come to the wrong hand. So we need to tell them that there is a limit to our knowledge and that the patient is the person who is teaching us everything. So our soft skills are exactly that. And that's what we have to teach them. Anytime a student loses his temper, you need to kind of understand why he did. You have to engage him and again sort out. You cannot afford to lose your temper. You cannot afford to be rude to the patient or to the student. So I deal with that way. I mean, I try not to lose temper, although in prevailing circumstances it can be quite trying.
Dr. Rohit, you are very correct. And one thing I want to add to it, simultaneously the temperament of the attitude of residents, like the the younger generation is also changed now. It's changing. Like when we were residents or 10 years back, now it is all changing. So their threshold level is comparatively lower. So that is to be needed. And second, another thing, like when you have, suppose there are many residents in any big institute, big place, and you feel like everyone should be trained. So that is true, like a proper classroom type of soft skill training may not be helpful, but at times a short session may be helpful for a bigger place where there are a number of residents is more.
Hello, myself Dr. Bisaria. I was director RIO Bhopal. I think we should see three things. One is the personal behavior of the residents, communication, and thirdly is the interaction between the patient, that is the communication skill and body language. Because students, as Dr. Rohit told, that they are very harsh sometimes, but we should not be. They are eating in the OPD. They are taking tea in the OPD, chit-chatting in the OPD. So these things they should observe and learn from the teachers. So these three things are very important.
One thing I do is, after I've done my figures, suppose I have lined up about 20 cases to do in the day. So what I do is, because most of them are topical cases nowadays, so I tell my resident to go and talk to the patient party immediately when the surgery is done, explaining them when to take out the bandage, how to take them out themselves, and then how to put the drops, every precaution. So the resident that is posted with me for that day, in fact is learning soft skills in that manner. Another important form of soft skills is communication that you had said. So I believe in prescription writing is a very important part of soft skills. So if I write, suppose if I have a busy OPD, so resident is helping me out with writing the prescriptions and all. So if the resident does not write in the proper way, I'll just remove that prescription, I'll tear it open, and I start writing it myself. And I have a particular point that I say in the prescriptions you're supposed to write in the patient's own words. No BD, no TDS, no QID. You have to write 4 times a day, and you have to make those round golas. And how many days, when is the follow-up, what is the MRD number, so that anyway, and the stamp has to be put. So in fact, what happens with that is that the resident gets embarrassed also, that sir has started writing himself everything and taking care of these things. So I think that can be incorporated.
Absolutely right, because it's actually medico-legal. So we have errors in prescription writing. Every 2 months we have actually a class where all the ones who made mistakes are called, the mistakes are pointed out. But in outpatient, if you're not vigilant, the prescription can just disappear as well. You're absolutely good, well said.
The last small little
yes.
point, the only additional point I would like to add is to identify people who do not have the soft skills and directly communicate to them what is the problem from their side that they are not able to communicate in the way we expect them to be. So understand in their shoes what is the factor that is actually inhibiting them, and try to demonstrate them using words like, when I was a student, I was like you, trying to be this way, but I have learned it in a hard way. It's better you meant this way. And one another small thing, whenever I encounter any problem during surgery, like very severe positive pressure, I have to demonstrate, I have to talk to the patient, what did you eat today? which place are you from. So in our theatre setup, even the name of the patient, all are, the place where they are coming from are all written on a board. So when I speak to them, you are from this place. Oh, you are referred by that doctor. That doctor called me yesterday. I will take care of you well. So I have to communicate to them, to the patient on the table. The residents who are seeing me are really impressed. So they actually see the positive pressure going away, the patient breathing easily. And these are the small little soft skills we have to demonstrate them so that they are really impressed.
One very important thing is we all agree to the point that soft skills are most crucial in today's practice, be it institutional, be it private. I've seen one lady losing the right eye after surgery because of endophthalmitis and so many things, and such beautiful skills of the surgeon that she comes for the second eye to the same surgeon, and all of us might have witnessed this scene. So it is utmost important to teach the residents and the juniors how to carry these soft skills, and for that, if a particular resident is posted for maybe 3 months or 6 months with a consultant, it would be a very prudent idea to have a silent monitoring and maybe a retrospective assessment of 3 months and then a grading system which might not affect the degree. But if you can observe and say that this part of yours was lacking, and a counseling of that very particular person by the consultant himself in one silent room where others don't know what happened, that might be helpful, because if something is grossly wrong, that can be checked. Otherwise, it's individual's own perceptions and behavior that we can't change.
Well said. One topic that we have not yet touched upon before we conclude the session is about giving teaching assignments to senior residents, to third-year residents. Would you rather be doing it yourself because there is more authenticity, or you think a young blood is there talking and that will have more impact? What is your opinion?
Yeah, I feel like delegating powers to them is also very important, because as a teacher, we should feel we are facilitators. So, and more interactive session would be take place, and they should be facilitated.
So I would say the best learning is when you teach. It's true for us also, and it will be true for the residents also. So as a what cases I presented as a resident, I still remember, because I worked them up better. I was grilled on them. So it's essential. I think the whole teaching system should change from me giving a sermon to them presenting and we evaluating. So that's like the way bedside that they present, we discuss. They should present so that they get the background information, and then we kind of add the few points. But sometimes it's a learning experience for all of us, so it's probably beneficial for both. So I would say the senior residents, the senior JRs should teach the junior JRs, and the senior residents should teach the junior residents. Of course, it doesn't mean that we kind of give up on our duties of teaching, but
we just add a little tip into this, that when we give the senior residents assignments to teach to the junior ones, and most of them, they are also doing PowerPoint presentations and preparing teaching material to teach, we just tell them to come and show us what they're going to teach, so that we are absolutely sure that they're not going to pass on some wrong information to the juniors. And we are present there when they are teaching, so that if any more points are to be added, we can always do that.
That is all true, like for PG seminars, other things, case presentation. Another thing, like for a PG teaching and training point of view, the case presentation, in fact, we should discourage them for preparing PowerPoint.
For that.
So that is better. It should
Case
be
presentation is mostly bedside, and as they are going to do it in the exam, the same way, so that they are more prepared for their exams.
Wonderful. I think we're right on time, and a very special thanks to Dr. Mittal, Dr. Mohit, Dr. Rohit. That almost sounds like poetry. Yeah. And Dr. Balamurugan. Dr. Sheth has a comment, and Dr. Shalini. Yes.
Regarding the resident teaching, so one other important aspect what I expect from my residents is, especially the second and third year, is to show their surgical videos, their complications. So that is when the first year resident actually learns like what step are they going wrong, which step they had difficulty, what were the complications they faced, and how we managed it. So that, because ours is primarily a surgical brand, so that aspect of surgical, discussing surgical videos is quite lacking into our system. So I try to inculcate that more, and I encourage the final year residents to show more of their videos and complications so that the juniors learn.
This is fully agreeable. You have said very correctly, but we should simultaneously keep in mind actually residents is usually what happens, they focus more on surgical things, then they start ignoring other things, other parts. If they see, we usually see the residents, if they feel it's a cataract, they will pay attention. Otherwise, they will just send the patient to other OPD. So that is also to be avoided. So in fact, we have to teach them that you have to see the patient in a big perspective, big way. It's not just in one cataract surgery only.
Thank you. And we'll take one last comment. Yes, then we will conclude the session.
Very good morning. Actually, continuing with what sir has just said about resident teaching a junior resident regarding the surgical skills, what I advise my residents is, like the period, the time when a new resident takes up a first case, it's the time when the other residents, they go off, thinking that, oh, he or she is going to take maybe an hour or maybe 2 hours and doing just a single case. So this is the time when I can go for a break, I can go for my lunch break. But what I advise my junior residents is, when you come for surgery, stay for that case which your colleague, your friend is doing, because you are going to perform the same mistakes. Because when we observe our seniors, we are apt. Our teachers are already apt. They know how to manage the cases. But it's the complication that the juniors make. The juniors are going to learn from their co-friends, the co-PGs actually, more than the seniors, I feel.
Good point. Thank you. Speaking of breaks, I'm not sure where the tea is available, but do let me know if you find out.
Thank you, Dr. Meenakshi. It was wonderfully conducted by you. Outstanding teacher, no doubt. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. So we start the next session.